The morning sky above Earth suddenly went dark as enormous alien ships appeared out of nowhere. These weren't small scout vessels or exploratory craft. These were massive warships, each one the size of a city, their black holes reflecting no light as they positioned themselves in perfect formation around the planet. People across the globe stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky in wonder and fear. Admiral Taman stood on the bridge of his flagship, gazing down at the small blue planet through the viewing screen. He had done this hundreds of times before with hundreds of different worlds. The routine was always the same. Show up with overwhelming force, make the demand, watch them surrender, then move on to the next conquest. Earth would be no different from all the others. The Admiral activated the communication system that would broadcast to every device on the planet below. His voice echoed through televisions, radios, smartphones, and emergency broadcast systems worldwide. The message was simple and direct, just like it had been for every other species they had conquered. People of Earth, you have one solar rotation to submit to hegemony rule or face complete annihilation. Down in Seoul, Captain Min was having his morning coffee when the screens in the Defense Command Center suddenly lit up with the alien transmission. He set down his cup slowly, watching the imposing figure of the alien admiral deliver humanity's death sentence. The other officers in the room stood frozen, unsure of what to do or say. Minho turned to his communications officer, a young woman named Yuna, who had been monitoring deep space frequencies for years, always hoping to detect signs of intelligent life. She had finally gotten her wish, but not quite the way she had imagined. Yuna, patch me through to Global Command. We need to get everyone on the same page about this. Within just a few hours, emergency meetings were being held in every major capital around the world. Presidents, prime ministers, and world leaders gathered via secure video links to discuss humanity's response to this unprecedented threat. The debate was intense, but surprisingly short. President Hyjin stood at the podium in the United Nations building, looking out at the assembled representatives from every nation on Earth. Behind her, through the large windows, the alien ships were clearly visible in the sky like dark storm clouds that refused to move. Citizens of Earth, she began, her voice being broadcast to every corner of the planet. We've received their message, loud and clear. They want us to surrender, to give up everything that makes us human, everything we've built and accomplished. I have one response to their demand. She paused, looking directly into the camera that would carry her words to billions of people. Let's throw the biggest party this galaxy has ever seen. The reaction was immediate and completely unexpected. Instead of mass panic, instead of people running for bunkers or praying for salvation, something entirely different happened. Party planning committees that usually organized local festivals and celebrations suddenly found themselves coordinating the event of a lifetime. In Berlin, DJ Jisoo was setting up equipment in her studio when the president's speech reached her. Without hesitation, she started making calls to every music producer, sound engineer, and party organizer she knew. Within minutes, she was coordinating a global music network that would synchronize celebrations across every time zone. Meanwhile, in New York, event coordinator So Yang was already pulling up contact lists for caterers, decorators, and entertainment companies. If humanity was going to face extinction, they were going to do it with style, music, and the biggest celebration the universe had ever witnessed, up in the alien fleet. Intelligence officers monitoring Earth's communications were reporting something that made no sense to their commanders. There were no military preparations, no evacuation orders, no desperate attempts to build weapons or shields. Instead, humans were debating whether LED lights or laser shows would look better from space. Admiral Taman couldn't sit still. He walked back and forth across his command bridge, his heavy footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. The holographic reports floating in front of him made absolutely no sense. In his long military career, he had conquered over 300 different worlds. and every single one had followed the same predictable pattern. First came the fear, then the desperate attempts at negotiation, followed by either immediate surrender or futile military resistance. But Earth was doing something completely different. Lieutenant Do-yeon stood at attention near the communication console, holding a datapad that contained the latest intelligence reports from the planet below. His usually confident demeanor was replaced by obvious confusion. He cleared his throat nervously before speaking. "Sir, I've been monitoring Earth's communication channels for the past 6 hours. Their governments aren't mobilizing armies or preparing defensive positions. Instead, they're planning festivals. Their military frequencies are filled with discussions about catering logistics, sound system requirements, and venue coordination." Taemin stopped pacing and turned to face his intelligence officer. The Admiral's 4 eyes narrowed as he tried to process this information. His species had evolved as apex predators, and his instincts told him that prey didn't behave this way. When faced with certain death, this must be some kind of primitive psychological tactic, he muttered, moving closer to the holographic displays that showed Earth's current activity levels. The planet was lighting up with increased energy signatures, but not from weapons or shields. The readings showed massive power draws, consistent with entertainment systems, lighting arrays, and audio equipment. Down on Earth, Festival Coordinator Minji hadn't slept in 18 hours. Her apartment in Seoul had been transformed into mission control for what was rapidly becoming the largest coordinated event in human history. Multiple computer screens showed video conferences with party planners from every continent. Her coffee table was covered with notebooks filled with logistics calculations, supplier contact information, and timeline schedules. "Listen, everyone," she said during a global video conference that included organizers from over 50 countries. "We need fireworks that are visible from orbital altitude. If we're going out, we're definitely going out with style. I want those alien ships to see a light show they'll never forget." Party planner Hun Woo from Sydney raised his hand on the video screen. "I've already contacted the pyrotechnics companies across Australia. They're willing to donate everything they have in storage. We're talking about enough fireworks to light up the entire southern hemisphere." Back on the Hegemony flagship, Communications Officer Kungmin was staring at his monitoring equipment with complete bewilderment. He had been intercepting Earth's transmissions for hours, expecting to find military codes, evacuation plans, or desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, he found something that left him speechless. "Admiral," he called out across the bridge, "I'm receiving some very unusual transmissions from the surface. The humans are sending party invitations to our fleet. One of them, a human named Sung-hoon, just transmitted a message asking if we have any dietary restrictions or food allergies they should know about when planning the menu." Admiral Taemin's mandibles began clicking rapidly, a sign of extreme frustration among his species. He moved to the communications console and read the message himself. It was written in perfect galactic standard language, which meant the humans had figured out their communication protocols in just a few hours. The message was polite, friendly, and completely insane given the circumstances. The Admiral stepped back from the console and looked around his bridge at the confused faces of his crew. In 300 conquests spanning dozens of star systems, no species had ever responded to annihilation threats with party planning and dinner invitations. Some had begged, others had fought, many had simply surrendered immediately, but none had ever asked about their dietary preferences while planning what appeared to be a planetary celebration. As the 24-hour deadline drew closer, something magical happened across Earth. The planet didn't go dark with fear or despair. Instead, it exploded into the most spectacular display of light and sound the galaxy had ever witnessed. From space, Earth looked like a jewel that had suddenly caught fire. But instead of burning, it was celebrating. Fireworks began launching simultaneously from every major city on the planet. New York's skyline lit up with cascading golden sparks, that spelled out messages of defiance in multiple languages. Tokyo's fireworks created perfect cherry blossom patterns that bloomed and faded in brilliant pink and white. London launched rockets that burst into Union Jack designs, while Paris sent up displays that painted the Eiffel Tower in rainbow colors. The synchronized launches created aurora-like displays that were clearly visible from orbital altitude, turning Earth's atmosphere into a canvas of human creativity and rebellion. In his studio high above Tokyo, DJ Woojin was orchestrating something that had never been attempted before. Using satellite networks and communication arrays around the globe, he was coordinating a musical synchronization that spanned all 7 continents. Every radio station, every speaker system, every sound device on Earth was connected to his master control board. The beat he created in Tokyo was simultaneously playing in Times Square, echoing through the streets of Mumbai, and vibrating through the ground in Sao Paulo. The music wasn't just sound anymore. It was a heartbeat that connected every human on the planet. People who had never met were dancing to the same rhythm, moving their bodies to beats that traveled at the speed of light from one continent to another. In Seoul, party host Chae Young stood on a massive stage that had been constructed in just 12 hours by volunteers working around the clock. Behind her, millions of people filled the streets as far as the eye could see. The crowd wasn't just from Korea. People had traveled from neighboring countries, abandoning their jobs and responsibilities to be part of this historic moment. She raised her arms above her head, and the crowd mirrored her movements perfectly, creating a wave of human motion that rippled through the city like water. "Are we going to let them scare us?" she shouted into her microphone, her voice amplified through speakers that could be heard for miles. "No," came the thunderous response from millions of voices. "Are we going to surrender our joy? Never." From his radio booth in London, Taeyong was broadcasting live to the entire galaxy. His show was being picked up by communication networks across dozens of star systems, reaching species that had been conquered by the hegemony years ago. "Attention, hegemony fleet," he announced with cheerful enthusiasm. "Welcome to Earth's Last Day Festival. You're missing one hell of a show up there. We've got dancing, we've got music, we've got the best fireworks display in the galaxy, and we're just getting started." Up in the alien fleet, crew members from dozens of different species were monitoring the celebrations with growing bewilderment and something else they hadn't felt in years: wonder. The communication arrays that were meant to intercept military transmissions were instead filled with laughter, music, and sounds of pure human joy. Fleet Engineer Naeem, a reptilian species whose homeworld had been conquered by the hegemony decades ago, was supposed to be monitoring Earth's power grids for weaknesses. Instead, she found herself unconsciously moving her body to the rhythm of the human music that was bleeding through their communications array. Her scaled head bobbed slightly to the beat, and her tail tapped against the metal floor in perfect time with the drums echoing from the planet below. She suddenly realized what she was doing and immediately stopped, glancing around the engineering bay to make sure none of her colleagues had noticed. But when she looked around, she saw that others were doing the same thing. A mantis-like communications officer was clicking his mandibles in rhythm, and even one of the feared hegemony overseers seemed to be listening more intently than usual. Admiral Temin stood on his command bridge, watching the planet below transform into a glowing beacon of celebration and defiance. His tactical displays showed no military buildups, no weapon signatures, no defensive preparations whatsoever. Instead, Earth pulsed with pure joy, and he realized, with growing alarm, that his standard intimidation tactics were completely useless against a species that treated death threats as invitations to party even harder. What started as Earth's defiant celebration quickly became something much bigger and more dangerous to the hegemony than any weapon humanity could have built. The party wasn't just happening on Earth anymore. It was spreading across the galaxy like wildfire, reaching places and people that hegemony had spent decades trying to control through fear and oppression. broadcasting coordinator, Jinwoo, had turned his small satellite communication company in Seoul into the galaxy's most powerful transmission hub, working with barely any sleep for 3 straight days. He had managed to hijack communication networks across 17 star systems. The technology wasn't even that advanced by galactic standards. But humans had something the hegemony didn't expect: creativity born from desperation, and an absolute refusal to go quietly. "If we're making a statement, that might be our last," he declared to his exhausted team of engineers and technicians. "Then let's make absolutely sure that everyone in this galaxy hears it loud and clear." The broadcasts weren't just reaching Earth's surface anymore. They were bouncing off communication satellites, piggybacking on trade route networks, and somehow finding their way into the most remote corners of hegemony space. Jinwoo had turned humanity's final celebration into the galaxy's most watched live broadcast, and billions of beings across conquered systems were tuning in to watch humans celebrate in the face of complete extinction. On the streets of Rio, party host Soman was doing something that should have been impossible. She was leading a conga line of over 10,000 people through the city, while simultaneously coordinating with celebration leaders on every continent through a headset connected to the global party network. Her infectious laughter rang out over the music, as people from every walk of life joined the dance line that stretched for miles through the Brazilian streets. But her laughter wasn't just entertaining the people around her. That same joyful, defiant sound was being transmitted across space, reaching species that had forgotten what freedom sounded like. On distant worlds where the hegemony had crushed all forms of cultural expression, beings were hearing human laughter for the first time and remembering what it felt like to be truly alive, up in the hegemony fleet. Something unprecedented was happening among the crew members. The ships weren't crewed entirely by the dominant hegemony species. Like most galactic empires, they used conquered peoples as workers, engineers, and support staff. These beings had been living under oppression for so long that many had forgotten their own cultures, their own music, their own reasons to celebrate. But now, listening to the humans' party in the face of certain death, something was awakening in them. A crystalline engineer who had been forced to abandon her real name and take a hegemony designation was working in the engine room when human music started bleeding through the communication systems. Without thinking, she began humming along to the melody, her crystalline body resonating with harmonics that she hadn't produced since her homeworld was conquered 20 years ago. The sound was beautiful and haunting, and it caught the attention of other conquered species working nearby. Soon, the engine room was filled with a strange mix of human party music and ancient crystalline harmonies that told stories of a freedom they thought was lost forever. Communications Officer Hareen was supposed to be monitoring military frequencies for signs of Earth's defensive preparations. Instead, she found herself documenting something much more interesting and terrifying from the hegemony's perspective. The chatter among the fleet's non-hegemony species was increasing rapidly, and it was all focused on what they were calling the human celebration phenomenon. Crew members who hadn't spoken to each other beyond work requirements were suddenly discussing the party, sharing memories of their own cultural celebrations from before the conquest, and asking questions that hadn't been asked in decades. Some were even requesting permission to monitor Earth's broadcasts during their off-duty hours, claiming it was for intelligence purposes but clearly motivated by something deeper. The situation became critical when Admiral Temin started receiving increasingly urgent and angry communications from Hegemony High Command. The messages were short, direct, and filled with barely controlled panic. "Admiral Temin, stop this cultural contamination immediately. The celebration is inspiring rebellion in conquered systems. We're receiving reports of unauthorized gatherings, music, and dancing on 14 different worlds. End this now, or face immediate court-martial." The hegemony leadership had finally realized what humanity had accidentally discovered, that joy and celebration could be more dangerous to an oppressive regime than any military force. because they reminded people of what they were fighting. For instead of what they were fighting against, the command center aboard Admiral Timon's flagship had never seen anything like this before. Maps and holographic displays that usually showed military positions and strategic targets were instead filled with party locations, music venues, and celebration centers. The Admiral's senior staff stood around the central table looking completely lost, their usual confidence replaced by confusion and growing panic. Admiral Timon's forearms gestured wildly as he paced back and forth, his heavy footsteps echoing through the silent chamber. His species had evolved as master strategists, capable of analyzing complex military situations and finding weaknesses in any defense. But Earth wasn't defending itself in any way. They understood. "I need someone to explain to me," he said, his voice rising with each word, "how a pre-space civilization that hasn't even mastered faster than light travel is somehow undermining our entire psychological warfare system with parties and music and dancing." Strategic Advisor Yunwu stepped forward, holding a data tablet that contained the latest intelligence reports from across the galaxy. His expression was grim as he activated the holographic display that showed communication intercepts from dozens of star systems. "Sir, the situation is worse than we initially thought. Rebellion chatter has increased by over 300% across 17 different systems since Earth's broadcast began. These aren't just random conversations either. Conquered species are actively organizing what they're calling celebration protests, in direct imitation of what the humans are doing." The holographic display showed examples from across hegemony space. On the mining world of Kepler 442, workers had abandoned their shifts to sing songs they remembered from before the conquest. On the agricultural planet TRAPPIST-1e, farmers were organizing dance gatherings in their fields instead of reporting to their daily quotas. Even on heavily militarized worlds, there were reports of secret parties happening in underground tunnels and abandoned buildings. Meanwhile, down on Earth, Party Coordinator Ji-hoon was addressing what had become the largest audience in galactic history, standing on a stage in the middle of Times Square, surrounded by millions of celebrating humans, and with cameras broadcasting his words to billions of beings across the galaxy. He delivered a message that would be remembered for generations. "They came here expecting us to cower in fear," he said, his voice carrying over the music and cheers of the crowd. "They want us to surrender our freedom, our culture, our very humanity. Well, I have news for them. We surrender to nothing but the pure joy of being alive." The crowd erupted in cheers that could be heard for miles, and across the galaxy. Conquered species heard those words and felt something stirring in their hearts that had been dormant for decades. Back on the hegemony flagship, the situation was becoming critical. The standard conquest protocol that had worked successfully for hundreds of campaigns had never encountered a species that could transform terror into celebration. Every psychological manipulation tactic in their playbook was not just failing, it was actively making the situation worse. Fear was supposed to make species compliant and desperate to surrender. Instead, humans were using the threat of death as motivation to celebrate life even more intensely. Isolation was supposed to make worlds feel helpless and alone. Instead, Earth's party was connecting oppressed beings across the galaxy in ways the hegemony had never imagined possible. The emergency communication from High Command came through on the Admiral's private channel, and the tone was unmistakably threatening. The message appeared as text on his personal display, marked with the highest priority codes. "Admiral Timon, you have full authorization for immediate military action. This celebration ends now, or your career ends with it. The Empire will not tolerate this level of cultural contamination spreading through our controlled systems." Deep beneath Seoul, in a bunker that had been constructed during the city's early days as protection against natural disasters, defense Coordinator Yujin was monitoring alien communications with equipment that had been hastily assembled by the world's best engineers. The bunker had been transformed into Earth's intelligence headquarters, and the walls were covered with screens showing intercepted hegemony transmissions. Yajin couldn't help but grin as she watched the enemy's communications shift from confident conquest reports to increasingly desperate damage control. The hegemony fleet that had arrived expecting an easy victory was now dealing with something they had never trained for, an enemy that fought back with happiness instead of weapons. Looks like our new friends up there don't know how to handle happiness as a weapon, she said to her team of analysts. They've spent so much time crushing spirits that they forgot what happens when someone refuses to let their spirit be crushed. The psychological warfare experts, who had conquered hundreds of worlds, were learning a hard lesson. You can't intimidate someone who responds to your threats by throwing a bigger party. When the first wave of hegemony attack craft descended from their massive ships, Earth's party didn't stop. Instead, it transformed into something the galaxy had never witnessed before, the most unconventional battle in recorded history. The music kept playing, the lights kept flashing, and somehow, impossibly, the humans kept celebrating even as alien warships filled their skies. Military Coordinator Dong Yun had been waiting for this moment. While the rest of the world had been planning the greatest party in human history, he had been secretly working with engineers, scientists, and party planners to prepare something special. From his command center, hidden beneath a concert venue in Tokyo, he watched the alien ships approach and smiled. "All right, everyone," he said into his headset, speaking to coordinators around the globe. "It's showtime. Release the party favors." What happened next would be talked about in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. Confetti cannons that had been positioned on rooftops and friends in stadiums around the world suddenly launched their loads high into the atmosphere. But this wasn't ordinary party confetti. Hidden among the colorful paper were millions of tiny metallic strips that immediately began scrambling the alien ships. Sensor systems. The hegemony pilots found their navigation systems going haywire as clouds of reflective chaff filled the air around their craft. What looked like harmless party decorations from a distance turned out to be one of the most effective electronic warfare systems ever deployed. But the humans were just getting started. The massive sound systems that had been set up for the global celebration suddenly shifted their purpose. DJ booths around the world coordinated their bass drops to create focused sonic weapons that literally shook the smaller attack craft out of the sky. The same speakers that had been playing dance music moments before were now producing sound waves powerful enough to disrupt alien engine systems. Technician Sulji had spent 3 days straight working without sleep to coordinate the laser light shows that were supposed to be the visual centerpiece of Earth's celebration. Now, as alien ships filled the sky, she repurposed every laser array on the planet into a precision targeting system. What had been planned as beautiful light displays became pinpoint accurate beams that disabled alien targeting computers and communication arrays. From his flagship, Admiral Taman watched in horror as his tactical displays filled with error messages and system failures. Ships that had successfully conquered hundreds of worlds were being taken down by what his sensors identified as party supplies and entertainment equipment. "This is impossible," he muttered, staring at the reports flooding in from his pilots. "How are party decorations and music systems destroying advanced military hardware?" His communications officer looked up from his console with an expression of complete bewilderment. "Sir, our pilots are reporting that the humans are attacking them with disco balls, glitter cannons, and something they keep calling bass drops. Half our sensor systems are offline, and the other half are picking up readings that make no sense." Down on Earth, the battle was being broadcast live across the galaxy, but not by military reporters or war correspondents. Party host Young-ho had positioned himself on a rooftop in Mumbai with a camera crew, and he was narrating the entire battle like it was the most exciting sporting event ever held. Ladies and gentlemen, beings across the galaxy, he shouted over the sound of explosions and music. Welcome to Earth's first ever Invasion Day party. And there goes another alien ship, folks, taken down by what appears to be a coordinated fireworks display. Let's hear it for our party crashers up there. Behind him, pyrotechnics exploded in perfect synchronization, creating patterns in the sky that were both beautiful and strategically designed to confuse alien pilots. Every time a human weapon system successfully disabled an enemy craft, the crowds below erupted in cheers and launched even more fireworks into the sky. The humans weren't just fighting back against the invasion. They were fighting with the same creative joy and boundless enthusiasm they had brought to their celebration. Every tactical victory became a reason for more music, more dancing, more defiant laughter that echoed across space and reached the ears of oppressed beings throughout the galaxy. What made it even more remarkable was that the humans never stopped being themselves. Even in the middle of a battle for their species' survival, they found ways to inject humor, creativity, and pure human spirit into their resistance. They had turned warfare into performance art, and somehow, impossibly, it was working better than any conventional military strategy ever could have. The galaxy watched in amazement, as Earth proved that sometimes the most effective way to fight tyranny isn't with bigger weapons or stronger defenses, but with an absolutely unbreakable refusal to let fear destroy your capacity for joy. What started as Earth's last stand had become the most watched event in galactic history. Across thousands of star systems, billions of beings were glued to their communication devices, watching humans defend their world in a way that defied everything they thought they knew about warfare. This wasn't just a battle anymore. It was a revolution broadcast live across the universe. Every successful human defense was immediately followed by victory dances that could be seen from space. When a squadron of alien fighters was disabled by a coordinated laser light show, the humans below broke into synchronized dance routines that lasted 4 minutes. When sonic weapons took down enemy bombers, street parties erupted with such intensity that the public celebrations were visible as heat signatures from orbit. Combat Coordinator Jungwoo was leading a squadron of converted civilian aircraft that had been hastily equipped with party supplies turned weapons. But even in the middle of aerial combat, his comm system was playing victory songs that had been composed just hours earlier by musicians around the world. The lyrics were being sung by people in bomb shelters and rooftop parties alike. "Blue Squadron, this is Jungwoo," he radioed to his pilots while dodging alien laser fire. "Let's show them how we dance in the sky." His squadron performed aerial maneuvers that were part combat tactics and part choreography, moving in patterns that were both tactically sound and artistically beautiful. When they successfully took down an enemy cruiser using confetti-based chaff missiles, the explosion was immediately followed by a fireworks display that doubled as a military signal to ground forces. But the real impact of Earth's battle was being felt far beyond the solar system. On 17 different worlds, where the hegemony had crushed all forms of cultural expression, conquered species were watching the humans fight with joy and remembering what freedom looked like. The broadcasts were reaching underground resistance networks, secret cultural preservation societies, and beings who had spent decades hiding their true identities under hegemony. Oppression. On the mining world of Kepler 442, workers who hadn't sung their native songs in 20 years began humming human melodies while they worked. On the agricultural planet Gliese 667, farmers started organizing their own celebration protests, using Earth's party as a template for resistance. The hegemony overseers tried to stop these gatherings, but they were spreading too fast to contain. Back on the hegemony flagship, Fleet Morale Officer Do-yoon was facing a crisis that no military manual had prepared her for. She stood before Admiral Tiemann holding reports that seemed impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. "Sir, I need to report something unprecedented," she said. her voice shaking slightly. "We're receiving defection requests from our own crew members. Species from conquered worlds are asking permission to abandon their posts and join the human celebration. Some are even requesting asylum on Earth." The Admiral's 4 eyes widened in disbelief. "How many requests?" "Over 300 so far, sir, and the numbers are increasing every hour. They're saying they want to learn how to party, how to celebrate, how to be happy again. Some of them haven't used their real names in decades, but they're starting to remember who they were before the conquest." The hegemony leadership was finally beginning to understand what they were really fighting. This wasn't a military engagement against Earth's defenses. They were fighting against the concept of joy itself, and they were losing badly. Species that had forgotten how to smile were remembering, and that memory was spreading faster than any virus through their conquered territories. From his broadcasting station in Seoul, journalist Seojun was transmitting live commentary that was being picked up by communication networks across the galaxy. His words were being translated into hundreds of languages and reaching beings who had never heard such concepts expressed so boldly. "Citizens of the galaxy," he said, his voice carrying across space to countless worlds. "Today, Earth proves that the greatest weapon against oppression isn't superior firepower or advanced technology. It's refusing to let them kill your joy, your culture, your fundamental right to celebrate being alive on distant worlds." Beings who had lived under hegemony rule for generations heard those words and felt something stirring inside them that they thought had been destroyed forever. The humans weren't just fighting for their own freedom. They were reminding the entire galaxy what freedom felt like, and that reminder was more dangerous to the hegemony than any weapon ever created. The battle for Earth had become something much larger. It had become a galactic awakening, with humanity serving as the catalyst for a joy-based revolution that threatened to topple an empire built on fear and oppression. The hegemony fleet that had there arrived at Earth with the confidence of conquerors was falling apart from the inside. What had started as isolated incidents of crew members humming along to human music had exploded into full-scale mass defections. The infectious power of human joy was spreading through the alien ranks faster than any plague, and it was proving impossible to contain. Engineer Neon had been fighting an internal battle for hours. The reptilian crew member had spent the last day secretly listening to human music through the ship's communication array, feeling emotions she hadn't experienced since her homeworld was conquered decades ago. During what was supposed to be a routine battle briefing, she finally reached her breaking point. The briefing room fell silent as she stood up, her scaled hands trembling slightly. Every eye in the room turned to her as she looked directly at Admiral Taman and spoke words that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. "Admiral, I formally request permission to seek asylum with the humans. I want to learn how to party." The room erupted in shocked murmurs, but Nain wasn't finished. "I want to remember what it feels like to celebrate being alive, instead of just surviving. I want to dance and sing and laugh like I used to before we were conquered. The humans are showing us that it's possible." Her words seemed to unlock something in the other crew members. One by one, beings from dozens of conquered species began standing up and making similar requests. A crystalline communications officer requested transfer to Earth's surface. A gas-based lifeform asked for permission to learn human music. Even some of the younger hegemony officers, who had never known anything but military discipline, began questioning why they were fighting against people who seemed so genuinely happy. Admiral Taman watched in horror as his carefully maintained military hierarchy crumbled around him. This wasn't defeat through superior firepower or tactical brilliance. His empire was falling apart because his crews had been exposed to pure defiant joy, and they wanted to be part of it. The situation became critical when entire ships began switching sides mid-battle. Hegemony vessels that had been attacking human positions suddenly stopped firing and began broadcasting requests for landing permits so their crews could join the celebration. The pilots weren't surrendering out of fear or exhaustion. They were defecting because they wanted to learn how to party, down on Earth. Victory Coordinator Bianco was facing the most unusual problem in military history: how to organize a victory celebration that was growing faster than anyone could manage. What had started as Earth's largest party was becoming the galaxy's most diverse cultural exchange. "All right, everyone," he announced over the global communication network. "We need to organize the largest conga line in human history, and we're going to include our new friends from space." Within minutes, humans in major cities around the world were forming dance lines that stretched for miles through their streets. But now they were joined by alien crew members who had abandoned their ships to participate in something they had never experienced: pure, unadulterated fun. Reptilian engineers danced alongside human children. Crystalline beings created musical harmonies that complemented human instruments. Gas-based life forms created light displays that enhanced the party's visual effects. The scene was so surreal and joyful that even veteran war correspondents found themselves laughing while reporting on it. Species that had been enemies just hours earlier were now teaching each other their traditional dances and sharing food from their different cultures. Back on the Hegemony flagship, the final transmission from High Command came through with desperate urgency. The message appeared on every screen in the fleet simultaneously, marked with the highest priority codes. "All units retreat immediately. Quarantine all personnel who have been exposed to human celebrations. This contamination ends now. Any ship that does not comply will be considered hostile and destroyed." But the order came too late. Across the galaxy, freed civilizations on dozens of worlds had learned humanity's greatest secret weapon: that celebrating life in the face of those who would destroy it was more powerful than any military force. The rebellions that had started as small celebration protests were now full-scale revolutions, and they were all using Earth's party as their inspiration and battle cry. As the remaining hegemony ships began their retreat, Communications Officer Sung Jin couldn't resist broadcasting one final message to the departing fleet. His words were transmitted across the galaxy, reaching not just the retreating ships, but every world that had been following Earth's impossible victory. "Thanks for attending Earth's party, everyone. Come back anytime you want. Next time, maybe, bring some snacks to share." The laughter that followed his transmission could be heard across 17 star systems, and it marked the beginning of a new era in galactic history. The Hegemony's chaotic retreat marked the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. What had started as Earth's defiant last stand had triggered the largest liberation movement the universe had ever seen. Across 47 star systems, worlds that had been under oppressive rule for decades were suddenly free, and they all wanted to celebrate in the same way that had inspired their freedom, with the biggest, most joyful parties their civilizations could create. Earth's surrender party was officially declared Liberation Day, and it became an annual galactic holiday that would be celebrated for generations to come. It marked the exact moment when the universe remembered that joy could be more powerful than fear, that laughter could topple empires, and that sometimes the best weapon against tyranny was an absolute refusal to let them steal your happiness. President Hai-Jin stood at the same podium in the United Nations building where she had first announced humanity's impossible plan, but now, instead of addressing just Earth, she was speaking to billions of beings across the galaxy, who had gathered on their own worlds to celebrate their newfound freedom. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began, her voice being translated into hundreds of languages and broadcast to planets she had never even heard of just a week earlier. "Today we learned the most important lesson in the history of civilization. The greatest rebellion against oppression isn't building bigger weapons or stronger armies. It's refusing to let them steal your happiness, your culture, your fundamental right to celebrate being alive." The response was immediate and overwhelming. From the crystal gardens of Kepler 442 to the floating cities of TRAPPIST-1e, newly freed beings erupted in cheers, music, and dancing that could be detected by sensors across multiple star systems. Festival Coordinator Minji found herself with a job title she never could have imagined: Galactic Celebration Director, working from a hastily constructed command center that had been built in just 3 days by volunteers from 17 different species. She was coordinating the first official Liberation Day celebration across dozens of worlds simultaneously. Each planet was adding their own cultural traditions to the growing galactic party. The crystalline worlds contributed harmonic singing that created beautiful resonance effects when combined with human music. Gas-based civilizations created light displays that painted entire atmospheres in celebration colors. Even the mechanical species from the Outer Rim contributed by turning their industrial facilities into massive rhythm sections that provided beats you could feel through the ground, in one of the most remarkable transformations of the entire liberation. Former Admiral Taman had not only defected from the hegemony, but had completely reinvented himself. Now calling himself by the human name Minsu, he was living in a refugee camp on Earth and learning to DJ electronic music from human teachers, who had no idea he had once commanded the fleet that came to destroy their world. I spent 300 years of my life bringing fear and oppression to the galaxy, he reflected during an interview with a human journalist. His 4 arms moved awkwardly as he tried to operate the DJ equipment, but his determination was obvious. I think it's time I learned how to bring joy instead. These humans have taught me that there's more power in making people dance than in making them afraid. The most beautiful thing about Liberation Day was that the party never really ended. It just kept getting bigger and better. Earth had become the galaxy's unofficial celebration capital, with beings from across the universe traveling there to learn human party techniques, study Earth's music and dance traditions, and understand how a species could maintain such incredible joy, even in the face of extinction. Cultural exchange programs were established between Earth and the newly freed worlds. Human DJs traveled to distant planets to teach electronic music production. Alien musicians came to Earth to learn about jazz, rock, and hip-hop. Dance instructors from dozens of species shared their traditional movements, creating fusion styles that had never existed before. As the first official Liberation Day celebration reached its peak, DJ Jisoo stood at her turntables in Berlin, preparing to play what would become known as the most important song in galactic history. She had spent weeks working with musicians from 47 different worlds to create a piece of music that incorporated elements from every freed civilization. When the song began playing, something magical happened. Fireworks exploded simultaneously across dozens of worlds, creating a light display that was visible from space on every liberated planet. The timing was perfect, coordinated down to the second, across impossible distances, proving that beings separated by light years could still move together as one when they shared the same joy. The galaxy had learned humanity's greatest lesson. Sometimes the best way to fight a war is to throw the best party the universe has ever seen, and never stop dancing until everyone is free to dance with you.